Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling a classic First Amendment problem. This is the kind of thing you'll definitely see on a quiz, so it's perfect for sharpening up your legal analysis. We're going to walk through it step by step.
All right, so let's just jump right in. The entire problem really boils down to this one big question. At its heart, you've got this tension, right? A city trying to do right by its community versus a group's fundamental right to free speech. So to figure this out, we're going to follow a super clear four-part legal framework. Think of it like a roadmap. First, we'll get the facts straight. Then we'll figure out what kind of government property we're dealing with. After that, we'll put the city's rule through the right legal test. And finally, we'll get to our verdict. Okay, first things first, let's lay out the facts of the case. You can't do any legal analysis without first getting a solid grip on who the players are and exactly what went down. Okay, so here's the core of the issue. You've got the city with this rule, and they have a pretty good reason for it, right? They're trying to serve a population that's split right down the middle. But then you have this group, the AAO, and they want to post a flyer with some seriously protected political speech, but it doesn't follow the rule. That's the conflict we have to untangle. All right, now let's get into the legal analysis. This is where we start building our case step by step. And, before we can even start talking about whether rights were violated, we have to ask a more basic question. Does the First Amendment even apply in this situation? This right here is the absolute first question you have to ask in any con law problem. It's called state action, and it's basically the on-off switch for the First Amendment. See, the Constitution is there to protect you from the government, not from, say, your neighbor or a private company. So the big question is the government involved here? And this pretty much answers it for us, doesn't it? The city, a government entity, owns the bus station. The city, the government, made the rule. I mean, that is a textbook example of state action. So check that box. The First Amendment is officially in play. Okay, so we've established the First Amendment applies. Now, we've got to classify the space itself. This is super important because the level of protection your speech gets really depends on the type of government property we're talking about. And the key to figuring that out is to look at what the government intended for this bulletin board. And you know what's cool? This one little fact from our story tells us everything we need to know. The city made the board available for free posting. By doing that, they intentionally opened this space up for public speech. And when the government does that, boom, it creates what's called a designated public forum. So because we're in a designated public forum, speech gets a ton of protection. It's not absolute, but it's close. This means the city's rule, it's got to survive a really tough, multi-part legal test if it's going to be constitutional. It's like running a legal gauntlet. But wait, before we jump into the big test, there's a quick check we have to do. We need to see if the rule is neutral. A rule is content neutral if it's about the time, place, or manner of the speech, the how, when, or where, not the actual message. And it's viewpoint neutral if it doesn't play favorites and pick one side of an issue over another. So let's apply that here. The city's rule, it's totally neutral. It doesn't care one bit what your message is, pro-immigration, anti-immigration, whatever. All it cares about is that you use both English and Spanish. It applies to absolutely everyone equally. So this is a regulation of the manner of speech, not the message itself. Okay, so because the rule is neutral, we get to use the classic three-part time, place, and manner test. Now, for the city's rule to hold up, it has to pass all three of these hurdles. It's not a best 2 out of 3 situation. So let's break them down one by one. First prong, does the rule serve a significant government interest? I mean, does the city have a good reason for this? Yeah, you bet they do. They have a population that's literally split 50-50 between English and Spanish speakers. Making sure everyone can understand what's being posted, that is absolutely a significant government interest. So part 1 is a pass. All right, on to part 2. Is the rule narrowly tailored? Now this sounds fancy, but it just means the rule can't be overbroad. It shouldn't restrict way more speech than necessary to achieve its goal. And this rule, it's pretty specific. It only applies to this one bulletin board in the whole city. It's not telling the AAO they can't speak anywhere else. It's a very targeted solution. So part 2 is another pass. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, part 3. Does the rule leave open ample alternative channels for communication? In other words, is the city completely shutting down the AAO? Not even close. They can still hand out their flyers on the sidewalk. They can hold a rally. They can post all over social media. There are tons of other ways for them to get their message out. And with that, the rule passes the third and final prong.
All right, let's bring it all home and get to our conclusion. We've seen the city's rules successfully navigate every single step of this legal framework. So, what does that mean for the final verdict? Where do we land?
Now, here's a key takeaway. Because the rule passed that time, place, and manner test, it also means that these other related rights, we're talking core political speech, freedom of association, even asking for donations, they aren't being unconstitutionally violated either. Any burden on those rights is just incidental, and it's justified by the city's really important interest.
So the bottom line is this. The city's refusal to post that flyer does not violate the First Amendment. The bilingual requirement is a totally valid time, place, and manner regulation. Why? Because it's neutral, it serves a significant government interest, it's narrowly tailored, and it leaves open plenty of other ways for the AAO to get their message out. And that just about wraps it up. But hey, before you go, here's a little something to chew on, just to really test your understanding. What if the flyer was in a different language, say French? Does the city's big justification, serving its equally divided population, still hold up? That's a good one to think about as you keep studying.